Hello, and welcome to Lost and Forgotten States. Many nations and countries have made it into the modern era, but some have not. Despite this, many had a profound impact on the course of history. In this series, I hope to inform you about these bygone realms, and hopefully track down why they ended up falling into the dustbin of history. Could they have made it into the modern day, or were they doomed from the start? Many know the story of Joan of Arc and the 100 Years' War. The eternal struggle for power between England and France has captured the imaginations of many. Though, beneath this struggle is a story of betrayal, intrigue, and power, defined by a collection of territories known as the Duchy of Burgundy, who would eventually try to become their own nation, an experiment which produced fascinating results. Were they French, or were they enemies of the French? This is the story of the Duchy of Burgundy. The idea of a Duchy of Burgundy would first begin just around the turn of the second millennium. Though at first its power would be vastly limited. The loyalties of the dukes were to the King of France, their undisputed feudal lord. During this era, the region was ruled by highly loyal, pro-French dukes, who would hold a significant amount of influence, usually getting along well with the kings of their nation. What is often considered to be the true beginnings of the state of Burgundy, however, was when the duchy was inherited by King John II of France, who was quick to grant the new territory to his brother, Philip. The ascension of Philip would be a defining moment in Burgundian history, as the seeds of dissent against the French and the idea of Burgundy being a separate entity from France began to take root. Philip would, by marriage of Margaret of Flanders, inherit vast swaths of Flemish land. Eager to continue expanding his influence in the Low Countries, he married off many of his children to Flemish and Dutch nobility. He would also expand his influence over the French crown as one of the regents for the young King Charles VI of France. Upon the death of Philip, his son, known as John the Fearless, would inherit the land of his father. John's initial reign would be defined by his rivalry with the Duke of Orleans, Louis. At this point, the 100 Years' War was on pause, but Louis wanted to resume it. This was unpopular and only contributed more to John's growing power. John wanted to force Louis off the Regency Council of Charles VI. Things would get serious when on a visit to the Queen of France, Louis was murdered by a band of thugs, who would later be revealed to have been following the orders of John. At this point, though, many French nobles were growing wary of the influence of John, and founded the Armagnac faction to curb the power of Burgundy. With this, civil war broke out in France, and the king was unable to stop it, as he had gone literally insane, and would even become known as Charles the Mad. This was not good for the already weak kingdom of France, and England seized this perfect opportunity to invade France in its moment of weakness. Things only got more chaotic as John was murdered by the Armagnac as payback for the death of Louis. John's 23-year-old son, Philip the Good, would take over following his father's death. Driven to desperation in desire for revenge, Philip would turn to the English. He would soon force the mad King Charles to surrender his throne in favor of the King of England, uniting the two kingdoms for the first time in history. However, the English king would die not long after, leaving both nations in the hands of his infant son. It was at this point that a popular peasant woman named Joan of Arc would quickly reinvigorate French morale, and would soon put Charles VII, a decidedly French king, on the throne of France, leaving the King of England ruling over only England once more. It is in possibly the greatest betrayal of their French origins, the Burgundians would find and turn in Joan of Arc to the English, firmly establishing their loyalties against France. As this rivalry grew, Burgundy began to act even more as independent from its supposed French overlords. While not independent on paper, Burgundy was independent in practice. Philip would continue expanding into the Low Countries, though would have to put down revolts frequently, as the Flemish natives were not happy with Burgundian rule. The first centralization policies would begin as an attempt to unify the multicultural region. These policies would expand even further under his son, Charles the Bold, who would see the height of Burgundian power and try to turn Burgundy into a strong, centralized state acting as a buffer between France and its rival, the Holy Roman Empire. He would actually continue diplomacy with both of these nations even further than his father or anyone before him had done, in order to prevent either from invading Burgundy. However, despite his efforts, Flemish revolts continued, and wars continued. In one against the Swiss, Charles the Bold would die in battle. He had no male heir, and Burgundy would be inherited by his daughter, Mary. Mary did her best to salvage the declining duchy, but would fail. In order to appease the Flemish, she would grant the great privilege, which would revoke many of the centralization policies of her father. Rather than pleasing the Low Countries, it effectively just gave them more influence and would speed up the process of independence they had been trying at for so long. She would end up marrying Maximilian Habsburg, Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, and her heir would be a Habsburg. After her untimely death in a hunting accident, a succession crisis sparked, which saw Burgundian lands split between the Holy Roman Empire and France, and thus the state of Burgundy was finally put to an end. Now, was the fall of Burgundy inevitable or preventable? Most likely, it was inevitable. Burgundy was peak feudalism. It was created by marriage and succession, and that's also how it ended. It was a geographically impossible nation, without any sort of natural borders. But the biggest reason Burgundy fell was that no matter how centralized the government was, it was a multi-ethnic duchy without a core ethnicity or cultural identity. Any and all identity came from the Duke, a feudalistic idea in an age of declining feudalism and rising nationalism. As it is, Burgundy could not have continued to exist for much longer. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. This was episode 1 of the Lost and Forgotten States series.